Assalamualaikum everyone, welcome to Do Station with yet another video. I hope you are good, healthy and enjoying and learning as well. We are covering our series in which we are learning the health and safety easy manner from beginner to expert level. And our module 4 which is hazard identification and risk assessment is going on. So today is the sixth video in this regard, and today we will continue the understanding the risk assessment process. Today we will cover third step, risk evaluation, in which we will understand how we do the risk evaluation and the factors that impact the risk rating, and how we use the risk scoring and risk matrices during these processes. And we will do some exercises to have some practical experience or good understanding. And also we will look into the what is meant by the risk variations and existing controls, how we consider them. So these are very interesting topics that we will cover today. So let's start them. Welcome to presentation everyone. We are covering our fourth module, hazard identification and risk assessment HIRA process. This is the part 6. We will continue understanding the implementation of a risk assessment process. Module guide. Our module is hazard identification and risk assessment HIRA process, which is a systematic process to identify all the potential hazards and effectively controlling them to avoid any harmful impacts of those hazards. So in the today's module, it covers a third step of risk assessment process, which is risk evaluation, including the risk factors that influence the risk scoring, risk matrix, risk priority number, and existing control measures. Key topic for today are evaluation of the risk, factors which affect the risk evaluation exercise to practice, then risk scoring and risk matrix exercise about the risk variation factors, and then existing control measures. Learning outcome. By the end of module, we will have good understanding about the risk factors that influence the risk, like environmental, human, and organizational factors, and the factors that we use to evaluate the risk effectively, likelihood, and consequences. Then will have good understanding of the uh, how to analyze the existing controls, whether they are sufficient or we need further controls, and what is risk scoring, what risk matrix, and how we use them, and how we do the process of risk prioritization, what is risk priority number. Evaluation of risk is the process of evaluating the risk so we can decide on the suitable control measures. The integrity of the risk evaluation process is crucial, refers to three factors: accuracy, reliability, and transparency. Accuracy refers to the how accurate is our risk assessment, how accurately we identified all the hazards, and how accurately we evaluated all the risks. Then the reliability refers to the decisions we have made, how reliable they are, how reliable data we use, how factual or accurate that data was. Similarly, transparency refers to the mechanism, how to identify the culprits or violators, and then what is the mechanism to make them accountable. Similarly, transparency leads toward the how we are going to achieve the legal or standard compliance, and then how we are going to win the trust and confidence of our stakeholders. At the same time, how the continuous improvement process is embedded into our system. Let's define risk. What is risk? Likelihood that a person may be harmed and account of the potential severity, or simply saying the probability that the harm will occur. The risk is basically the property of hazard, combination of two factors emerging from the hazard, likelihood and consequences. Likelihood is the probability or the chances that the hazard will trigger and cause us injury or loss. The severity or consequences are the outcome or amount of the damage or loss that we will have to bear, and we represent the risk with R. Factors which affect the risk factor. There are basically three types of factors that increase the likelihood of the incident or harm: occupational factors related to the job or task, then human factors which are related to the worker behavior and its competency and ability, then environmental factor, workplace conditions that contribute to the harm. Then there are evaluation factors which basically describe the risk, likelihood and severity. We use them to evaluate the risk. Job related tasks that may influence the risk level. uh, Knowledge test time. You can stop the video. Which factors come to your mind related to the job that may increase the level of the risk or influence the risk? So they include task complexity. Complex tasks like specialized knowledge is required, operating heavy equipment or some plant. Then task frequency and duration, activities that you have to do a lot of time a day or for long periods of time, like a worker working on assembly line or data entry specialist. Then physical demand, jobs that require some specialized specific physical capacities like manual handling. Then cognitive demands, the jobs that require continuous use of the brain, like consistent concentration, attention, use of memory, or the complex problem solving skills, like workers working in the air traffic control system. Then equipments and tools, the intrinsic properties of power tools, so they may increase. Then the work organizations related factor like uh, workload or the stress level due to the demands or the deadlines. So these are organization or job or task related factors that may influence the risk. Human factors, let's understand them. Knowledge test time, you can stop the video. Which human factor comes to your mind that can increase the level of the risk? So these are basically related to the behavior and ability of worker to perform the job safely. It includes the attitude and motivation. If attitude and motivations are positive towards the job and health and safety, then he will execute the job safely. Otherwise, it can be risky or it can increase the level of the risk. Then the competency level, if the worker is competent enough, have sufficient knowledge, ability, trainings and experience related to the job, then he will perform the job safely. Otherwise, incompetency can be a factor that will increase the risk. Lack of ability may be due to the some mental fatigue or physical fatigue, so it can increase the risk level. Then cognitive abilities, maybe the worker has some impairments, mental impairments or mental conditions due to which he is unable to react quickly or the adjust quickly. So these are the some human factors that may increase the level of the risk. Environmental factors, knowledge test time, you can stop the video, think of the factors related to the work environment that can increase the level of the risk. So let's understand these factors. These are basically related to the work environment conditions that can contribute to the harm. Bad lighting may lead to the incidents. Ventilation, poor ventilation system can impact the health negatively, like there is a humid atmosphere. Then temperature extremes like very cold or very hot, there can be the health issues. Then the noise and space, noise can create the health issues as well as the distractions, maybe miscommunication or lack of communication or other distractions may lead to the incidents. Then the space, maybe inadequate space you are there, so may increase the stress level or may cause the sleep or trip hazards. Then vibration, sources of vibration within the work environment can cause the health related issues. Then air quality, etc. So they can also cause the health issues. So these are some environmental factors related to the work environment which may increase the level of the risk. Next, evaluation of the risk. Now let's look at the factor that we use to evaluate the risk. These are number of people. More people are exposing to the hazard, the risk will be high. Then the likelihood of the injury, which is the basically probability of the hazard to trigger and cause the injury. If the likelihood is high, obviously the risk level will be high. Then the third factor is the severity of the injury. If the severity or the outcome or the consequences of the incident are high, then the level of the risk will be high. The likelihood and consequences or severity are basically the emerging properties of the hazard that change as the conditions or circumstances change. So as these two factors change, then the risk level also change. So let's understand this with a simple example. Let's we are doing a work at height and in the windy condition, bad weather condition. So the likelihood in the extreme weather the worker will fall is high. But if we do the same activity in the stable weather where wind speeds are low, then the likelihood of the incident will decrease. Similarly, if the worker falls from the 20 feet height, then the consequences will be severe, he can die. But if the same person falls from the 5 feet height, you are doing the work activity at the 5 feet, and he falls from the 5 feet, then the consequences will be low and the so will be the level of the risk. Similarly, if the more people are working there on the platform, then the likelihood will increase that someone will fall. Similarly, if the more than one people fall from the height, the consequences of the severity will increase. Now let's understand how we evaluate the risk. So we represent the risk with the R, which is a combination of likelihood and severity. So first we determine the likelihood, which is a probability that hazard will occur and cause harm. And then we label it in the low, medium, and high. So how we evaluate? So we look at three factors and then decide on the basis of these three factors. Number one, how often the hazard is present there and for how long the hazard will stay there. Second, how many people will expose to the hazard. And third factor, which is the existing controls, which controls we have implemented. So on the basis of these three factors, we estimate or evaluate what is the probability of the likelihood. If the probability is, let's say, 10%, then we rate it as a low. If the probability of the likelihood to trigger the hazard is 50%, up to 50%, then we rate it as a medium. And if the likelihood is above 50%, then we rate it as a high. Similarly, then we evaluate the consequences. So how we do that? Then first of all, we look at what will be the consequences of the hazard. And then we look at the factor that what will be the implications of that consequences on the organization. Third, we look at the existing control measures. So on the basis of these three factors, we decide either the risk is low, medium, or high. If the consequences are minor, then we rate it as a low. If they are significant, then we rate them as a medium. If the consequences are very severe or catastrophic, then we rate them as a high. Now let's understand it with very simple example. So we have a slip hazard due to the water spillage. So let's look at the likelihood. First factor, we have to look how often the hazard is there and for how long the hazard is there. So we came to know that there is no permanent leakage or the water source. Rather, it was just because of the drop of the water glass from a worker. So it will be cleaned shortly. Then how many people are passing by there? We came to know that very few people are passing by this part of the organization. Then what are the existing control measures? So we saw that there is a warning sign displayed mentioning that, showing that slip hazard ahead, be careful. So what is the likelihood? No, likelihood is very low. As the water hazard is not permanently there, it will be removed shortly. People exposing to it are very few, and the existing control measure warning signs are displayed. Then what will be the consequences? Let's rate them. So the first factor, if worker falls, what will be the consequences? Maybe he gets some bruises or rare chances of the broken bones. Now, what will be the implications on the organization? Maybe organization have to provide the first aid or maybe some medical treatment, or maybe the in case of broken bone, worker have to go to the leave. Then, what are the existing controls? The existing control, the signboard warning signs is displayed that is showing that, awareing the people that be careful, spill hazard is there, slip hazard is there. Then, what will be the consequences now? So now we can rate the consequences as moderate, as if he falls or he gets some broken bone. So the consequences are significant. Now let's understand numerical values versus labels. So we saw how we label the risk in the low, medium, and high. But generally we prefer the number system or number representation of the risk over the label system, as we get some benefit. In the number system, we get more precision and exactness. Let's say we have two risks then that we label them as a high. So in the label system, we cannot distinguish between them. What is the difference between them, or what is the exact level of each? But maybe in the representing in the number system, one will get the value of 25 and the other will get the value of 16. Now, in the number system, we exactly know that what is the difference between them and what is the exact level of each. Similarly, in the number system, it becomes more easy and convenient for us to understand and interpret the risk. Like now we know that the risk with the rating of the 25 is more critical and should get the priority when we are going to address the risk. Similarly, in the label system, we cannot consistently or uniformly apply the labels. But in the number system, we apply the number uniformly to each of the risks. Similarly, it becomes very easy for us to prioritize the risk using their rating or the score level. And there is a term that is called RPN, which is basically the risk priority number. And it becomes convenient for us to allocate the risk priority number for each risk as per its the level of the risk in the number representation. So what is the risk priority number? Risk priority number is the value assigned to each risk that identify or indicate its priority level when we are going to address or mitigate the risk, which is based on the rating of the risk that we got from the number representation. So now how we get the risk priority number? So we get the risk priority number by looking into the three factor or evaluating the three factors. Number one, likelihood, which is basically the what is the probability that the harm will occur. Then the severity, what will be the severity of the harm. The third one is the D, which is the detection factor, how much effort we need to detect some specific risk or hazard, especially under the changing circumstances, continuously changing conditions or circumstances. But generally, when we are doing some qualitative risk assessment, so we take the detection factor as a 1. We take the value of the detection factor as a 1, and we just use the likelihood and severity to rate our or prioritize our risk. Now we understand how we rate or represent the likelihood and consequences in the number. Now let's understand what is the risk scoring and risk matrix system that we use for the risk ratings. So risk scoring, we know that in the risk scoring we represent the likelihood in the numbers from 1 to 5. If the likelihood is low, we can represent it as a 1 or 2 accordingly. For the medium, we can represent it as a 3. For the high, we can represent them as a 4 or 5. Similarly, for the severity, if there it is a minor, then we can rate it as a 1 or 2. If it is moderate, then we can rate it as a 3. And if it is serious or major, then we can rate it as a 4 or 5 accordingly. Then by multiplying these two numbers, we get the risk scoring. Let's say likelihood is 1 and severity is 2, the risk score will be the 2. If the likelihood is 4 and the severity is 3, then the risk score will be 12. If the likelihood is 4 and the consequence of severity is 5, then the risk score that we will get will be 20. Now, let's look at the risk matrix. That is another method of rating the risk. So basically, this is a visual representation of likelihood and consequences and showing the rating of the risk. So in which we plot the likelihood and consequences against the x-axis and y-axis, and then we combine that is in the corresponding cells or the box in front of likelihood and consequences. Let's say if the consequence of severity is 3 and the likelihood is 4, the corresponding box that is showing the number 12 is the rating of the risk. Then this matrix basically also gives us categorize the risk in low, medium or high. Now do some exercise. So there is a stairs. Let's look at the likelihood that harm will occur. So first factor, how often and how long the hazard is there. Stairs looks permanent, so hazard is permanently there. How many people, looks some entrance, maybe too many people passing by. What are existing control? No control. So likelihood is high. So we can rate it as a 4. Now, like look at the severity. What will be the consequences? Maybe broken bone, uh, significant or the major consequences. What will be the implication on the organizations? Maybe significant or the major, like medical cost, or the worker will go on the long leave, or maybe some compensation claim or the legal consequences. So we can rate it as a high 4. Then the total risk we rated as a overall risk we rated as a 16, which is high. Next, that there is some platform looks like access platform workers are using. So what is the likelihood? So look at the factors. Number one, how often and how long the hazard is present there. Looks like some temporary activity. So until the activity we are performing the activity, hazard will be there. How many people are exposing? One person using the platform. Then what are the existing controls? No existing control. So likelihood is high. Then we rate it as a 5. So now what will be the severity? Significant or major, maybe broken bones or the death. What will be the implications on the organizations? Very significant or the major, like some compensation claims or the legal consequences, or maybe the worker will go on the long leaves. So severity is the 4th. So overall risk we rated as a 20, which is very high. Next example, there is a paint worker is using. So let's look at the likelihood factors. So how often and how long the hazard is there. So if worker is a painter, obviously his job is painting. So hazard, whenever he is painting, the hazard is there. Then how many people or one worker is using or performing the paint activity. So here one worker is involved. Then what are the existing control measures? So we can say that he is using the normal PPEs, personal protective equipment. So what will be the likelihood? We can rate it as a moderate or 3. So what will be the consequences, severity? So maybe due to the prolonged exposure, he can get some health issues which are chronic irritations or allergies like things which can disturb him for the long periods of time. And what will be the implications? Maybe compensation claims or maybe the legal consequences. or the medical treatments, which can be very expensive. So what are the existing control worker is using the PPEs. So how will you rate the severity? We can rate it as a high 4. So what is overall risk? 12, which is moderate. So you see how we evaluate the risk. Now let's describe the different score levels or the risk scores. If your risk level is between 20 to 25, it is very high. You must stop the activity immediately and take actions to reduce it. If the risk score is between 15 to 16, it is high. Still, maybe you need to stop the activity and take the action and reduce the risk level. If your risk score is between 8 to 12, it is called moderate. Then you have to improve the situation, maybe between the specified time or deadline. If your risk level is between 3 to 6, then it is called low risk. Then you have to keep monitoring and find the areas of improvement so you can further control it or reduce it. If your risk level is 1 to 2, it is called trivial risk, which is very low. You don't need any further action, but maintain your keep monitoring and maintain your control so they are effective. What do we do already? So in regard of management of the risks, so our responsibility is to ensure that we are managing the risk as far as is reasonably practicable. So the level of the risk or the control measures that we require in addition to existing controls will depend on the effectiveness or the robustness of the existing control measures, which may include the policies and procedures. Maybe they are good enough, sufficient, or maybe we need to improve them. Then training programs and information that we are providing to the workers, maybe they are adequate, sufficient, or maybe there are some areas of improvement. Similarly, instructions and supervisions level and personal protective equipment program. Then the key point basically is that the level of the risk or the and the additional control measures that we need to adopt will depend on the adequacy and the effectiveness of the existing controls that we already have implemented. Next, risk assessment form or template plays very crucial role in the effective risk assessment. They let provide us structured approach and consistency. They make sure that we don't forget any critical aspects of the factor that we have to cover during the risk assessment. And also they make sure that the previous risk assessment that we put the effort into, we can compare our information with that. So that can be very helpful. Also at the same time, it is time saving. We don't have to think during the risk assessment process what to do, how to do. Things are mentioned in the risk assessment. We just follow them, the template. So we save our time. At the same time, it makes risk assessment process more accurate as the critical aspects of the factor that we have to analyze or compare are already mentioned there. So it let us ensure that we don't forget any of them. Also, the communication with the stakeholders becomes very easy. The risk prioritization process becomes very easy as the all the risks are categorically mentioned and we can say how is their ratings and then we can easily prioritize them. So we have covered all the topics. Let's summarize them. So we looked into the evaluation of the risk, how we evaluate the risk using the likelihood and consequences. Then which are the factors that influence the risk, environmental, human, and organizational factors. Then we did exercise for the risk evaluation. Then we looked into the what is the risk scoring and risk matrix and how we implement them. And then we looked into the risk variation factors and what are the existing controls and what is their impact on our risks. So that was it for today. I hope this video will be helpful for you. Thank you very much for watching and supporting me. So see you in the next video with the next topic. Until then, take care, stay safe and healthy and keep me in your prayers. Allah Hafiz.